Once upon a time in ancient Persia, in the bustling city of Shiraz, there lived a merchant named Bahram. He was known across the bazaar for his sharp tongue, fine silks, and glittering jewels brought from distant lands. His shop stood near the Grand Mosque, a well-known landmark in the town. Around it, the bazaar was full of life, merchants calling out their goods, children running between the stalls, and the warm smell of roasted nuts, saffron and rosewater drifting through the air. The sound of wooden carts over the cobblestones added a steady rhythm. Bahram had everything a man could desire: a fine house with carved wooden doors, servants to tend his needs, and a loving wife who admired his success. Yet despite his wealth, he was never satisfied. When he earned 1,000 gold dinars, he longed for 10,000. When he bought 10 horses, he wanted 100. One evening, after the call to prayer echoed over the rooftops, Bahram sat in his courtyard counting his coins. He whispered to himself, "If I can fill just one more chest with gold, I shall never want again." But greed, like the desert wind, knows no end. It so happened that one afternoon, a poor beggar knocked at Bahram's door. He was weary from travel, his clothes in tatters and his lips dry with thirst. Asking for something to eat and drink, Bahram was away at the bazaar, but his wife, a gentle and pious woman, welcomed him kindly. She gave him cool water to drink, warm bread to eat, and dates from their store. When the beggar had eaten, he raised his hands in prayer. "May the merciful reward you for your kindness. I have little to give, but I carry knowledge. There is a hidden valley beyond the mountains where jewels lie scattered upon the ground. I tell you this as a gift, for only those with a pure heart deserve to know it." The beggar leaned closer, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Listen carefully," the beggar whispered. "From your town, take the road that leads east, past the silver olive grove. Keep the sun to your left for 2 full days, until you reach the river that winds through the red-hued canyon. Follow its twisting path north for another day, then cross the hill where the lone cypress stands, tall and bent by the wind. On the 4th day, you will enter the forest of twisted pines. Tread lightly, for the paths shift as if alive. On the 5th day, climb the ridge where the earth glimmers faintly at dawn. There, you will find a stream of clear water flowing toward a hidden hollow. Follow it down for the 6th day, and on the 7th, the valley will reveal itself, opening only to those who are patient and pure of heart. But beware, the valley rewards only the content. If you take more than you need, misfortune will follow." The merchant's wife was astonished. She bowed her head but said nothing. When Bahram returned that night, she kept the secret in her heart, for she knew well her husband's greedy nature. Months passed. Bahram began to suffer losses in his trade. His caravans returned with fewer profits and customers grew scarce. One evening he came home weary and bitter, his face long with sorrow. But his wife could not bring herself to tell him the secret, so she remained silent and tried to comfort him with gentle words. After days of struggling with her thoughts and seeing her husband so troubled, finally decided to break her silence and tell her troubled husband the secret. She told him of the beggar, of the food she had offered, and of the secret treasure valley he had revealed in gratitude. At first Bahram stared at her in disbelief, then his eyes gleamed like fire. "Wife," he shouted, his voice trembling with eagerness, "this is our chance. We must go at once and claim it." Though her heart hesitated, she followed him, trusting in fate. And so together, they decided to set out for the valley the beggar had spoken of. At the first light of dawn, Bahram and his wife set forth along the long route, carrying the beggar's directions carefully in their minds. The town faded behind them as they traveled east, and soon they came upon the silver olive grove. Bahram's eyes shone with eagerness, his steps quick and restless, while his wife, though filled with hope, kept her heart cautious, mindful of the beggar's warning to be patient and pure. By the 2nd day, they reached the river winding through the red-hued canyon. Bahram leaned over the bank, eager to see if the valley might be near, yet his wife moved with measured steps, urging patience and keeping a careful watch. They followed the river northward, pausing only to rest and speak in low tones, her mind always alert for danger or mistake. On the third day, they climbed the hill with the lone cypress stood, twisted and tall, as though it had watched the world for centuries. From there, they entered the forest of twisted pines, whose shadows danced in the winds and whose paths seemed to shift beneath their feet. The fifth day brought them to the glimmering ridge and the clear stream flowing toward the hidden hollow. At last, on the seventh morning, the valley unveiled itself before them, a quiet, untouched place, shining softly in the sun, unseen by any but those patient and pure of heart. Bahram's joy could hardly be contained, yet his wife's cautious heart urged him to temper his excitement and tread with care. Together, they stepped forward, ready to uncover the secret the valley had kept hidden for centuries. When Bahram stepped into the heart of the valley, he could scarce draw his breath, and beside him, his wife's eyes widened in wonder. And what they saw made their hearts leap. Rubies lay scattered among the grass, glowing like drops of fresh blood. Sapphires gleamed with the deep blue of the summer sky. Emeralds sparkled along the riverbed like leaves formed of glass. Never before had they seen such treasure, nor felt such awe in their hearts. Bahram's heart raced. He turned to his wife, who clutched her small satchel tightly. "It is more than I ever dreamed," he whispered, though greed dripped from every word. "We shall gather all of it, and none shall be richer than we." His wife spoke with quiet firmness. "Take only what you can carry, no more. If you take beyond your share, the valley will not forgive." She looked into his eyes, pressing her hand gently on his arm. "Remember well what the beggar told us, patience and care, Bahram. Let not greed rule your heart." At first he filled his satchel with rubies. Then he filled his cloak with emeralds, letting them spill over his arms. Next, he removed his turban and stuffed it with diamonds, his hands trembling from the weight. His arms ached, his back bent, yet still he reached for more, his eyes glimmering with desire. Seeing her husband's frantic grasping, she became afraid at the sight of his endless greed and again tried to stop him. "Bahram, remember the beggar's words. Take only what you can carry and no more," she urged softly, but he heard her not. In the thrall of his desire, he had entirely forgotten her warnings. Then Bahram shouted, harsh and urgent, "Silence, fool! I will take as much as I can carry. Do not stop me." The echo of his words stirred the quiet valley, and his wife's heart trembled at the greed that now ruled him. As soon as Bahram spoke, the valley seemed to come alive. Ruby slipped from his arms and tumbled into the grass, scattering like drops of blood. The wind whispered through the bent and twisted pine trees, carrying a chill that made his skin prickle. Then, without warning, the ground beneath his feet began to shift. Tiny cracks appeared, widening slowly, swallowing jewels and soil alike. The clear stream he had followed so faithfully began to roar, its waters rising as though angry at his greed. Bahram staggered, clutching at his cloak, but the weight of the treasure and the valley's wrath pressed down upon him. His wife cried out, reaching for him, her heart pounding. "Bahram, stop. The valley will not forgive." But he, lost in his desire, did not heed her. Every gem he grasped seemed to vanish, slipping from his fingers as the valley punished him for his heart ruled by greed. The winds rose higher, the trees groaned, and a deep, trembling sound echoed through the secret valley. The valley, as if alive, had begun to reclaim its treasure and to teach a lesson that no mortal could forget. Then suddenly the earth opened wider beneath Bahram, and with a cry lost in the roaring waters and groaning trees, the valley swallowed him whole. His wife rushed toward him, tears streaming, trying madly to stop him. "Bahram, stop. Please," she wailed, but it was too late. Clutching her small satchel of carefully chosen jewels, fell to her knees, weeping. She realized then that the beggar's warning had been true. Bahram was offered wealth enough for a lifetime, but his greed devoured him. He desired more than his hands could carry, and so the valley claimed him. At last, she turned back toward her home, walking alone through the forest and hills, her spirit heavy, mourning the husband she could not save. When she finally reached her town, her small satchel of jewels swinging at her side, people noticed her walking alone, curious at her sudden return. They remembered how she and Bahram had set out together, happy and content, and now she walked alone, her face pale and her eyes wet with sorrow. "Where is your husband?" they asked, their voices full of concern and wonder. With a trembling voice, she began to tell the truth of what had befallen them in the hidden valley. She spoke of the rubies, sapphires, and emeralds of Bahram's greed, and of how the valley, as if alive, had swallowed him whole. She spoke of the warning of the beggar, the patient path, and the lesson of restraint. Some of the townspeople were astonished, unable to believe such a tale. Others shook their heads and muttered among themselves, thinking her a mad woman, carried away by grief, telling stories no mortal could believe. And some looked at her with pity and unease, unsure whether to trust her words or to fear the strange sorrow she carried in her eyes. With the passage of time, her grief softened, and she began to live a simple and content life. The jewels she had carried were more than enough for her to meet her needs, and she no longer thought of wealth or riches as the measure of happiness. She used what she had wisely, helping those in need, feeding the hungry, giving shelter to travelers. Her small home became a place of kindness, and the townspeople, who once doubted her tale, now came to see her not as a mad woman, but as one touched by experience and guided by wisdom. And so the tale of Bahram, the merchant of Shiraz, was told for generations, not as a tale of riches, but as a lesson, how greed blinds the eyes and burdens the hands. A man who gathers more than he needs will one day be crushed beneath the weight of his own desire. Stories live on when they're shared, so like, subscribe, and ring the bell to keep the magic alive.